Well, thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Alana Berry. I currently serve as the founder and chairwoman of the Brian Allen Stevenson School of Excellence, and I'm excited to get to chat with you all throughout our panel today and get to learn a little bit more about each of your experiences. So to kick us off, I will just go in the order of which I see people on my screen, but would love for folks to give a brief introduction of themselves, of their work, and kind of the connection to diversity and culture inclusion work. So Dessa, would you like to go first?
Hi, yes, it's Disa actually. Debra Burton. So hi, Alana and my fellow panelists, also the She-Sharp Corner. My name is Debra Burton and I'm the Executive Director at Zip Code Wilmington. So first, I want to thank all of you thank you for inviting me to this panel. I think this topic fits in really well with the overarching theme of growth mindset. And I want to say that I'm not an HR professional or a D&I specialist. There are those who devote their entire careers to that. So I'm not trying to stand in their shoes here. I defer to their expertise. The views I'm providing today are from my background as a military veteran, an intellectual property attorney, and currently as the executive director of a nonprofit coding boot camp here in Wilmington, Delaware. So to tell you a little bit about Zip Code, because I think that's what ties me to this D&I, to this diversity and inclusion discussion. Zip Code Wilmington is a nonprofit coding boot camp in Wilmington, Delaware. Zip coders come from all walks of life. So no matter what your age is, gender, educational background, or previous career, Zip Code Wilmington coaches everyday motivated people from diverse backgrounds to become skilled professional software developers and data engineers. As a result, our corporate partners have come to us as a trusted source for diverse entry-level software developer and engineering talent. We give our students an experience that fast tracks them into a great career from whatever career they're starting from. They end up with a great salary and they do it all within 12 weeks. So we have about 450 graduates. 30% of those are African-American or Latinx, and nearly 40% are women. So our demographics far beat the industry standards, and our approach to recruiting is the reason for it. It's because it's built on a foundation of accessibility to all.
Great, thank you so much. Would love to hear from Jose next.
Sure, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks. So I'm Jose Malabo. I'm Vice President of Marketing, Communications, and Admissions at Morehouse College in Atlanta. Like Disa, I'm not an HR representative or professional. I will not stand on those grounds, but I think my connection is based on my role at Morehouse College. We are the only historically Black college dedicated to serving men. Our population is nearly 100% Black or African American, and again, all men. It comes from, if you're familiar with HBCUs and how they came to be and their significance in our culture and in our community and in the nation, my tie to it is probably most relevant given what's happened in this country over the last 18 months to 24 months. I think I've seen being an immigrant and a person of brown, I guess Black, white, and brown. I'm a brown man in a Black men's college. I get to see, I think I have a unique perspective on what corporations are trying to do in terms of engaging themselves in this conversation and learning and making an impact in social justice. And I think it's particularly important, and other than Mahesh being a good friend of mine, that I joined is because not only is that more relevant today, you take a look at the history of the college that I work at, it's produced Dr. King all the way up to Reverend Warnock, who's the first Black senator of the state of Georgia. I got to witness some of the most amazing acts of protest over the last 24 months and learned a ton about how that can be relevant as, companies put together programs that address these issues. I got to work with Microsoft and UPS on an initiative that helped address the digital divide that our students face relative to going virtual over COVID. It was amazing to see that and be part of it. And so that's, I think, my connection to this, as well as my personal journey through this.
Great, thank you. And I think, John, you're back with us. If you would just like to kind of introduce yourself, your work, and your connection to diversity, culture, inclusion.
Sure, yeah, and I apologize, but I'm back and running. So my name is John Harare. Pleasure to meet you guys. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm CEO, co-founder of a company called Windowsware. We're a resource for brands to do competitive research. What every brand wants to know is what every other brand is doing all around the world. And we provide that information at people's fingertips. We started off capturing all the window displays of all the retailers globally. And then from there, we started capturing absolutely everything they do, from the brick and mortar stores to the pop-up shops to the events, the trade shows, and then obviously all the digital content, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and then obviously their emails, their websites, etc. So, being a digital online company, we have clients all around the world. I speak English, our website's in English, but English is only spoken by 4% of all the world's population. So, I always think about diversity. I always think about inclusion because obviously it's the right thing to do, but it's also the smart business thing. There are so many people, so many cultures that are out there. And obviously the more connected we are as human beings through digital, through online, through social media, it's all ways to connect, and obviously learning each other's backgrounds and cultures and history that helps us better connect with each other. And obviously everyone's connected online, and everyone's one click away from each other, but at the same time, there's a lot more context behind who that human being is, what history they have, what their religion is, what their background is, what have they gone through. So, I'm just very grateful that we've got a lot of our internal team as a company is very diverse by both ethnicities, races, religions, backgrounds, and then obviously all of our clients are as well. And I personally love the fashion industry itself because I think that they are always very progressive when it comes to trying to be as inclusive as possible, based on other industries that are out there. But we're always trying to strive and take things to the next level. And obviously we're not necessarily perfect. I don't know if anyone's perfect, but we're always trying to improve upon that. So it's a pleasure to meet you guys, and thanks again.
And thank you all for those introductions. And so we're just going to dive right in. And I'm curious to know, and maybe John, we can start with you, just in your own words, and you kind of hit on this a bit, but like, what is diversity? What is inclusion, and how does that relate to culture? And are there any common misconceptions that you see in the work that you do that people have?
Yeah, and look, that's a great question. When you look at our DNA, we're all the same, right? We're all very similar as human beings, human to human. But then obviously, when you look at us, when you just look visually, right, we look all different. And obviously we have many different histories. My family's first generation American, my parents are from Israel. I'm personally Jewish. Those are minorities that exist in the world, even though I'm white with blue eyes, right? But my background, the culture, the people that I'm descended from, have always been the ones that were persecuted and not necessarily included into the societies that they came from. So I have a personal. I can personally relate to stories of challenges that are out there and systems that are in place that benefit certain types of people, but ultimately we're all the same, and we're all trying to get ourselves to the next level, and we're all trying to do better. I personally live in New York City. I think New York City is an amazing place when it comes to diversity. I went to college at Indiana University. Indiana as a state isn't necessarily diverse. That was a shock to me. But I live in New York City, and I'm grateful for that as well, because obviously you see many different types of people, backgrounds, cultures, ethnicities, And I think that's extremely important because, you know, if you're not exposed to different types of people and different ways of thinking, you know, then you get pigeonholed. And from a business standpoint, I think it's the most important thing to do is to understand different types of people and understand where they're coming from, because that only improves upon your way of thinking, and it only improves upon how that business is able to change and to adapt to the current trends of the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of insight there, and I would pass the same question over to Jose to see what your thoughts are, again, around diversity, inclusion, culture, how you would define those things, and some of the misconceptions that come up for you in your work.
Yeah, so I'm going to go a little meta on you for a second, because I think I take a step back from looking at what CSR was 10 years ago, and we were talking about the environment and climate, and now it's about equality and social justice. So you can see my framework on this is where this sits currently, and I think it's a great thing, but I think it represents to me the acknowledgement that all the work that was done in prior generations was left incomplete. I think it's a positive recognition that we're having this talk, that this is more and more part of my day, that companies that we work with at Morehouse are addressing this with us in very real terms. I could say in my 3 years there, the volume and the activity regarding this and us and HBCUs, and just take a look at the donor dollars that have come our way over the last 6 months, not just our way, but other HBCUs. It's a recognition, I think, of the fact that this is ongoing work. Since 1960, I think 63 was, you know, Brown versus the Board of Education. I feel like what we're in right now is book 3, chapter 2 of the fight for equality in America. So to me, what we're talking about in terms of those acronyms, DE&I, they're stair steps towards that larger goal of equality and social justice. I see it, and I say this all the time to my white friends, to my Hispanic friends, the difference I've seen from moving from predominantly white spaces to predominantly Black spaces is that here we talk about this daily in the conversation on the regular. And I think that's the piece that there are misconceptions on at large, and that is that people don't want to have the dialogue. I think that misperception or misconception is predicated on the fear of saying something inappropriate or untoward. And I think in my experience of being new to the HBCU space, is that's not at all the case. I make mistakes all day, but not with malice. It's to gain understanding and perspective. And I recently wrote this to somebody, a good corporate partner of ours, and I had to have a talk because they were having a difficult time with the nomenclature and the culture around Morehouse College, around HBCUs, around being a predominantly Black HBCU, because HBCU doesn't mean exclusively Black, right? It means historically Black from a tax code and a categorization perspective. There are other HBCUs that are predominantly white in their population. And she struggled with it. And I told her, it's not a matter of race. It's not a matter of Black, white, or brown, or female, or male. It's a matter of perspective. And I think that understanding of how language works and within relationships and context, that's the piece that we need to be brave enough to talk about openly. Raising the question and say, I didn't know about that. I didn't know, please tell me. And I have this very conversation in my own home. And I think those are the things that when I travel through a very, very socially active Atlanta, where you can argue the civil rights movement had a home and started here, I think that's the difference between here and other places I've lived. We talk about it freely here, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think that perspective is really helpful, right? The notion of fear when it comes to talking about diversity, inclusion, and culture, and both the fear of unknowing and the fear of messing up, right?
Right.
And the underlying piece there being that if you don't try or engage, then how will you learn? Disa, would you have anything to add?
Sure. So from my perspective, I see diversity and inclusion as a reflection of a company or an entity's commitment to ensuring that the demographics that it reflects to the community at all levels reflects that community. it reflects the current and prospective clients and all persons affected by its operations. But not just that, to me, diversity and inclusion from a company perspective is that it reflects the commitment of the leadership of that company, ensuring that they have a productive internal process which hires, recruits, trains, promotes, and retains that diverse talent. So for me, the common misperception that I see is that companies within an industry will use other companies within that industry as a benchmark on whether they're doing well with diversity and inclusion or not. And I think that's a failed way of looking at benchmarking. I think that when companies actually look at the communities they represent, like I said, when they look at their clients, when they look at those that they serve, if they're reflecting that group, then they're doing well. And if they're not, then they're not doing well. And you can see that a lot in the tech industry. So we provide diverse tech talent to the tech industry. And, by having a very open and accessible process, recruiting process, training, we are able to recruit talent well beyond what the industry is able to recruit. And I think the reason is because the industry is they're looking at each other and not looking at the community they serve.
Yeah, so I want to pivot us here to talk a little bit, and I think some of you brought this up, but and this doesn't necessarily have to go to everyone, but I'm curious about, I think a lot of people would recognize that, 2020 shed light on a lot of issues related to diversity, inclusion, and culture, particularly in the United States. And I'm curious to know, in your work, how the conversation has changed from your perception over the past 5 years, and what do you think it'll look like 10 years from now as we continue to engage in this work? And I'll maybe kick it to Jose first.
Was that because I was smiling when you asked the question? So five years ago, I was working at a predominantly white institution, which is a university, also in Georgia. I think just apples to apples, the conversation wasn't happening. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say that. We weren't having it. But I also worked in the Valley. I worked up in New York in corporate world. I think we were paying a lot of lip service to it 5 years ago, 10 years ago when I was in the Valley. There was no initiative specific for this. I think we had aspirations of it at the companies we were at, but I'll give you a specific example. I was at a very large Silicon Valley company that's publicly traded, which I won't name. Just go on my LinkedIn, you'll figure it out. I turned the corner after I worked there. I commute there hour a day. I'm there 6 a.m. till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I see thousands of people. And over time, your brain gets trained to seeing things as a large tapestry. I turned the corner. I saw the first Black person I'd seen in weeks. And his face was probably appalled at my face for being so surprised. But I was genuinely surprised to see another person of culture in my space, right? So I think that to me is a signal that things have changed, because I didn't even stop and have the talk with the guy. And today here we are talking about it here with 4 wonderful people whom we've never met. And I think that's the big change. I have to look at that and go, this didn't happen 5 years ago. And the conversation, like I said earlier, at least within HR, corporate communications, CSR space, not docking it, was all about, the greenscaping of our brands. And so now I'm oddly enough, at probably the most renowned HBCU for social justice and equality in the country. No knock against our competitors, but how different that is today. Now I see it from a minority Black perspective, and I could see that the inbound coming my way. It's not coming. They're not coming to me as a head of marketing communications about what we're doing with a LEED certified building. That's not happening. I think where I'd like to see it go is to be inclusive of where we're going as a country. We've yet to look forward at the diversification of our nation. Is going to look a little more like me in 20 years, right? A Hispanic majority is coming. No one's talking about 2045 in a real way. How are Black and brown people going to lead when they're the majority numerically in this country? That's the opportunity gap I want to get to. I want to get to, how do you take people of color who've historically not been in a leadership position at scale and get us ready to be part of the leadership, domain in this country, both in public sector and private sector. That to me is where I want it to go. That's if I spent nothing else, it would be on that.
Thank you. And I think that's a really interesting perspective from a data point, right, about where we're going. I would kick it to Disa next if you had anything to add.
Yes. So in 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, zip code didn't exist. We were founded in 2015. It was a result of a dinner conversation by our co-founders. They were lamenting over the fact that, the banks in Wilmington were poaching the same software developers from each other. There were all these jobs that remained unfilled, and there were all these people in Wilmington that needed jobs. And they said, there's got to be a way that we can fix this. And they decided to put together a nonprofit coding boot camp that would be accessible to all, that would be a low barrier to entry, because they designed having diversity up front into the organization. And so in the beginning, it was really unique to see a nonprofit boot camp that had so many African-American and Latino folks coming in, so many women. There at one point, the classes were half women or over half women coming through zip code. And I'm really proud of having that history with zip code. So it's interesting that now we're having these conversations. Our corporate partners are very pleased to know that they have this connection with us, but a number of other corporate partners are coming to us and saying, oh, wow, we're seeing that you have this diverse talent, and we're not sure how you have that. Well, we have it because we started with that in mind. And so now that there's 450 graduates, 75% of which are in the Wilmington region, but 450 graduates, many of them with diverse backgrounds, I, like Jose, I'm looking to see what happens with the leadership that comes next, because now these folks are getting promoted into, VP positions. They're senior techs. They're voted, 2019 most influential technologists in Philadelphia came from zip code. So they're going to be taking these leadership roles and moving into tech and really moving things forward. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But I'm also excited to see that companies that were not necessarily looking to come to a coding bootcamp to find their tech talent are now starting to change their mind. They're now starting to see that just going to a four-year institution is not the only place where they can find talent. There are people who have had careers in marketing and other fields that have decided that they want to move into the tech sector, and going back to school may not be in the cards for them. So you've got these folks that have bachelor's degrees, that may have master's or PhDs, that want to get into tech, and they're doing it in a way that makes sense for them and their family. And so there's all this diverse talent coming out of a boot camp, and I think that's just going to keep growing, and that's going to influence the tech industry.
Yeah, and I think that's a really helpful frame too, because we think about diversity of experience, right? Even down to, what does the job description say? Like, are you requiring a degree level? And who does that exclude when there are so many different variants of diversity that can be included when you think about candidates? So, John, I'll pivot to you if you have anything else to add here around, where we currently see diversity and inclusion work and where we see it heading.
Yeah, look, I mean, what was said was right on point. I would just add two more things to what was already said. Number one, I think the CSR used to always be at the very back of the annual report, and now it's actually on the very front end. Let me just share my screen real quick. Let's just see if I could just show you. If you guys can see this, you guys can see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So yeah, this is Instagram stories right now. This is content that we capture at Windows, where you can see here Aritzia, hashtags stop Asian hate. This is actually from today. Coach, to all of our members of the Asian community, we hear you and we support you. I mean, if you just think about companies and brands to use their most powerful tools, social media, their Instagram accounts, and this is content that they're sharing right now, and that's what I'm really trying to highlight, that, this is John Varvatos here. We stand with the Asian community. So, not to say that that's, diversity and inclusion, but it really is, brands are really taking a stand to actually define what their values are. And I think historically, that was either it was understood because it was part of the culture, but you don't necessarily, unless you're actually part of the culture, there's really no way for you to actually know what a company stands for as far as part of their values. And then obviously when it came to the CSR, that was a statement, Jose, you mentioned lip service, I kind of agree with you. And now it's part of the front end. It's actually part of the way that companies and brands are defining themselves. And, instead of using their Instagram account to showcase their products and services, which is, what normally people would assume, digital marketers, social media people would assume to use those tools to showcase your products and services. Now they're using those tools to define what their values are. And that we have not seen up until this past year. And that's number one. Number two, the next thing I'll just add is, regardless of what generation you're at, like I'm in the millennial category, Gen Z is requiring this. So, every generation that is now a consumer it's actually part of the offering of a company, right? And that's actually never been part of it before. It used to be, oh, you give me a good product or service, thank you very much, right? Now it's, okay, give me a good product and service, and what are your values? And if your values don't actually meet with my values, then I don't really care about your product and service. You know what? I could actually care less about it. And that's also something that's never happened before. So, I think that these trends are fantastic. It's a very exciting time that we're at. And it's very much, you could just see it. I mean, it's actually happening. And that's, I think it's all good stuff that's happening.
So, believe it or not, we are at our last 2 minutes of this conversation, and I'm just going to close us here with kind of combine either or. But if there's one piece of advice you would give to anyone listening, or one resource that they could access to dive a little deeper, what would you recommend? And I would say, about 20 to 30 seconds per each person. So let's start with Disa.
Well, so I would say if you're a company that's having issues in finding tech talent that's diverse, I would say come to our website, zipcodewilmington.com. But more than that, I would say if you're looking for statistics and information about the tech field, go to code.org. They have a lot of information there.
Great, thank you. John?
I would personally what I've done is go into Wikipedia. There's just so much information there about, every background, culture, ethnicity, concept. Because, Jose, you mentioned this, right? A lot of people are scared to have these conversations. And, the best way, to have the conversation is just to be informed in a non-biased way. Obviously, there's always bias out there. But I feel like Wikipedia is a resource that, tries to be as independent as possible. And that's not the case when it comes to a lot of news organizations and social media that are paid by advertisers. So it's also just about, going to the right sources, unbiased, for just factual information. Then obviously once we're equipped with the facts, then I think it's much easier to have those conversations. But I would just pick Wikipedia. It's something that I personally use when I'm not necessarily as informed as I want to be about certain issues.
Jose?
I'll go as quick as possible. So it's two things. I think if you're looking to recruit diverse talent, there's literally 101 historically Black colleges that want to hear from you. Just Google it, and there's even more minority-serving colleges and universities around the country. They want to hear from you. And then two, if you want to do something on a program basis to help society, get involved with the public education system. I think the gap in knowledge and perspective is because remember who wrote the curriculum and the textbooks that taught me, and I had to learn at 24 what the civil rights movement was. We need to impact this because we have 20 years to change the perspective. This is probably the most important 20 years in my mind that I'll ever live. And I think I'd love to see companies impact that, because otherwise they're being taught by the same textbooks I learned from.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts, your opinions, your feedback today. I'm sure there's ways to find all of us on the different social media networks, but I appreciate the conversation that we've engaged in today.
Well, that was a great panel. Like, I loved it. Everybody was fantastic, and we are right on time. And it's just thank you so much for all of you having. Looks like this is a topic we probably end up spending whole day on this. So maybe look out for me. I'm going to send email. We can do something more together. Bring it and do it a little bigger. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mahesh. Bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you.